Serena Williams from Catsuit to controversy. This article started off with a literature review in both sexism and racism in sport, and found that sports can be perceived as the leading institution of masculinity in American culture. It constantly is a reminder that since males are biologically superior than females, that then makes people believe that they are superior in general to females. However, since the 1970s, some of the most visible female athletes are professional tennis players. Sometimes this can be thought of due to the attire that they're wearing. Men typically play tennis in polos and pants or shorts, while women typically play tennis in a tank top and a tennis skirt. Now, when it comes to media coverage, typically for most sports, male athletes receive higher media coverage. And when it comes to the journalists used, female journalists typically report female athletes, and they humanize news more and bring stories allow stories to have a more positive outlook than when men report stories. However, this article states that some people believe that the Grand Slam tennis tournaments for both men and women, since they're held at the same time, they typically have similar coverage. However, female athletes are equally, if not more popular than men when it comes to the coverage for this particular tournament. Tennis being linked to clothing in the female body and sexuality also has racial factors linked into it. Tennis is primarily a white middle-class sport and doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. However, Aletha Gibson was the first to break the color barrier in the professional tennis world, and the Williams sisters, both Venus and Serena, are right behind her. With the success of their accomplishments that the sisters have had, they disrupt the social capital achieved through this legacy of exclusion. Women of color have been found to receive less media coverage than white women. The issue with Serena Williams in 2018 was that she defeated her Czech opponent during the preliminary rounds of the French Open only 9 months after having her daughter. The catsuit that she wore was this black catsuit. You can see it in this picture here. That she said made her feel like a warrior and a queen. However, it wasn't just because she didn't want to wear her skirt and her tank top, and it wasn't because she had just given birth to her daughter 9 months prior. It was due to the health reasons that she had had after her pregnancy. The catsuit was fun and functional and comfortable, but it also helped alleviate problems such as the blood clots that she was having to deal with from having been pregnant. In August of 2018, the French Tennis Federation president stated that her catsuit was no longer accepted to be something that you could wear. They stated that she's gone too far and she must respect the game. And in their eyes, the catsuit did not respect the game. However, with that comment that he had made, many critics stated that the president had sexualized Williams' body and was insensitive to motherhood and loaded with racist thoughts and comments about Black people and athleticism. Following these comments, Williams was in a press conference and she had stated that she was fine with the decision that he had made. However, she realized that while the catsuit was helping her keep her from getting blood clots, she could find other ways to address this issue by wearing compression tights or wearing something like that under her skirt instead of wearing a catsuit. The second controversial issue that Williams had faced was the three code violations, costing her upwards of $17,000 in one match. She had fines from racket abuse and coaching violations and things that she was saying to the referees, which then ended up causing her to have this large fine and think that just because she's a woman, the men are out to get her, and that's not how this game should be played. However, the referee at the time wasn't the only time that it had happened. Later, Billie Jean King thanked Serena on Twitter for shedding light onto the issue, saying that when a woman is emotional, she's hysterical, and she's penalized for it. When a man does it, he's outspoken, and there's no repercussions. Serena Williams is one of the most fine players in women's tennis. However, it does also give her quite a bit of media coverage compared to some of the other women's tennis players. This article originally had 4 research questions that they then broke down into 2 for each section, so they had a total of 8. The research questions were: would the sex of the article's author affect the framing of athletic descriptors used for Serena Williams? And would the sex of the article's author affect the framing of Serena Williams' maternity? The second question was: would the race of the article affect the framing of the athletic descriptors used for Serena, and also how they framed her maternity? The last 2 sets of questions broke down the type of publication and how that affected the descriptors used for Serena Williams and how they framed her maternity. Also, the time frame in which the article was published for the athletic descriptors used and her maternity. Serena Williams had 2 major international news stories over the course of a few months in 2018, so the outlets portrayed her differently depending on the time of the publication. So looking at the time of the publication and where it was published and who wrote it and the context of the word choices that they used was what this study was looking towards. So this study had a sample selection, a coding scheme, and a coder training. So for their sample selection, they used the keyword Serena Williams, and they initially found 183 articles between both international and domestic newspapers. Their timeline was between May of 2018 to September of 2018, and they ended up finding a total of 744 results. After breaking down and refining some of the results, they broke it up into the coding scheme. So this scheme looked at the different variables in the articles. So the sex of the author, the race of the author, the type of the publication, the time frame that was written, and also if it had mentioned anything about motherhood, maternity, pregnancy, especially if depending on how Williams was framed, whether it was positive, negative, or not included. Coder training took place for 2 different coders. They were trained social science researchers, and they coded 180, or they looked at 80 of the 103 total articles. The results that they had found was 121 articles were written by men, 39 were written by women, and 23 were unidentifiable authors. That being said, they looked at all the authors' pictures to determine what their gender was. The race for the authors, there was 139 white authors, 8 black authors, 5 that were either Hispanic or Latino, 2 Asians, and 6 from other races. Of their articles, they found that 59 of them were published in American newspapers, while 122 were published by international newspapers. Some of the athletic descriptors that were used when they were looking into these articles were concentration, skill-based athletics, composure, commitment, courage, experience, intelligence, modest, introverted, outgoing, extroverted, attractiveness, size, or parts of the body. So they took those descriptors, broke them up for each of the articles to determine how many times male authors use them versus female authors, also white authors versus other authors from other races. Serena Williams is one of the best female athletes in the last 2 decades and has reached the pinnacle in tennis. Issues of racism and sexism have shown that Williams is in a sport that can serve as one image of society with many other projecting images in the back of society. 2 of the controversial topics that were discussed in this article, along with what had happened to Serena in 2018, was returning to competitive competition 9 months after having her daughter, also playing in a catsuit. The other controversial issue was her court behavior that she was fined for. Sometimes she believed that she was fined more than what a man would be fined for doing the exact same thing. This study analyzed the pregnancy and motherhood of Williams. However, she had only had her daughter 9 months prior to the competition, so there wasn't much to go off of. Some people think that due to it being such a short period of time, that's why her emotions were all over the place, and that's why she was acting how she was and acting out, if you want to call it that, and having these issues with the refs and the tennis officials and presidents. This study did have many limitations. The first, it had only analyzed newspaper articles from major American and international papers. They didn't look at television series or blogs that could have had Serena Williams painted in a different way. This study also had provided no pictures or visual elements, and it only examined the coverage of one athlete. It didn't examine multiple athletes. It didn't examine the Williams sisters. It only looked at Serena Williams and her 2 controversial incidences that had happened in 2018. And the last one that they had talked about was what I had mentioned earlier. The sex and race of each of the authors was determined by looking at their photos from the website. They didn't necessarily go and interview these authors or meet the authors. They looked at their picture and determined if they were male, female, and what their race was. And my references for both the article and the picture of Serena in her catsuit. Thank you.